Hello and welcome to Google Firestarters. I'm Neil Perkin, the curator and the moderator of Google Firestarters. So Firestarters for about 10 years was a series of live events that we did with the interested and interesting of the advertising and marketing industry, which we pivoted now into a series of video chats. And I'm delighted to say today's guest is both interested and interesting. I'm happy to introduce Emma Cookson. So Emma Cookson is the partner for You and Mr. Jones. Emma, would you care to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, that's who I am. I'm someone who started my career as a brand strategist in ad agencies. I worked particularly for BBH, Bartle Bogle Haggerty, for many, many years, some in London, and then for an extended period of time in the US. I've spent nearly 20 years of my career based in New York. And I left BBH 6 years ago now. Did some client-side consulting work, and then I've been at You and Mr. Jones now for about 4 years, and we call ourselves the world's first brand tech group. It's a new group. It's a fast-growing, fast-expanding, and flourishing group of tech and tech-enabled companies that all help brands do different bits of marketing. So so that's where I am now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. And I'll come back to that proposition. I think it's a particularly interesting proposition, if I may, later on. But so Firestarters, as you know, is structured around 5 questions, focus on learning and insights and predictions around the industry and so on. So I'm going to crack straight into the first question, if that's all right, Emma, and ask you about the best thing that you've learned in your career to date. What was that?
Yeah, when I thought about this one, I found myself thinking about Nigel Bogle, the Bogle of Bartle Bogle Haggerty, used to say quite often, the harder the problem, the more complicated the problem, the simpler the answer needs to be. And I remember it resonating and observing the truth of that. He was a man of goodness gracious, that's rude. He is a man of great power of simplification, and I think that is I think that's my biggest learning: the power of simplicity. I think in marketing, maybe in business in general, the ability to simplify complexity is a superpower. And I suppose, in this early stage of my career, when I was a strategist, I saw that definitely being true. The more that you can synthesize information, analyze situations, and obviously strategy is just plotting a path forward, a way to meet an opportunity or solve a challenge. The more you can do that with great simplicity and clarity, the better. Especially, I think, because strategy then has to be implemented. So if it's useless. I always used to say to strategists, you think strategy is coming up with answers to challenges or coming up with ways to solve, to meet opportunities, but that's only half of it. The other half is, it has to be executed, it has to be implemented. So you've got to be able to solve the problem, and then you've got to be able to inspire other people to actually implement and execute. So simplicity is really, really powerful, because it means people can understand. It means people believe, more likely to believe in it, and then to be able to execute it. So I saw that potency there, and then I ended up in sort of more general leadership roles. And I think if you're generally leading, whether you're leading an organization or a team or a big multifaceted entity, leadership's often about just making a decision about, in any given situation, this is the best thing to do, the way forward. And again, you need other people to get what you're on about and to follow it and implement it. So again, back to simplicity. I've been lucky to work for and with lots of great people, and they mostly have that quality as one of their arsenal of strengths. So yeah, that I think that would be, well, certainly be one of my big ongoing learnings, I suppose. The power of simplicity, the power of simplifying complexity.
And I guess because marketing and indeed advertising seems to be getting more complex all the time. So do you think that lesson about being able to simplify is becoming more relevant than ever?
Yes, absolutely. Especially in, as I say, in situations where you are leading any kind of group or entity. So it's not to say that obviously one doesn't. Conversely, like all these truths, it's always black and white, isn't it? Conversely, you often need to be, especially if you're a practitioner expert, you need to obviously be in command of ever more complex and deep detail, and often very technical detail nowadays. But nevertheless, as I say, for leading and charting forward, that simplification thing is really, really valuable. And as I say, I see it all over the place. And certainly I would say in my current role, I speak to lots of brand leaders and CMOs and CDMOs, etc. I would say as well, I mean, if there's one universal quality, they're all utterly deluged, utterly. It's like it is a fire hose of new stuff and new potential. So again, like back to that Nigel comment, the more complex and the more tough the situation, the higher the value that accrues, I think, to being able to quite simply and crisply chart ways forward. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I mean, we feel like we all feel, I think, that we live on quite a lot of exponential curves, don't we, nowadays in this world. So I can't see the quality going away. I mean, obviously, I have to be careful. It's simplification. It's not being simplistic. There is such a thing. People don't always use the word like that, but simplistic means oversimplified, simplified to a point of inaccuracy or misrepresentation. That is a danger. But as I say, generally, these powerful leaders, effective operators, they can articulate what needs to be done and how and in what order pretty crisply.
So, I mean, I'm just interested to think, because we have a lot of planners, strategists, and so on, and people in this who watch these episodes. And so, if you're a planner, strategist looking at this and thinking, well, how do I simplify? What are the kind of best kind of techniques, I suppose, for thinking about how you can do that to communicate a complex idea or the essence of something really well?
Yeah, I think the cliches are true. Graphic representation of situations, even very multifaceted ones, always helps. We respond to pictures and visual representations more easily than we do to dense amounts of words and text. So the ability to graphically represent is one thing. It is still true as well that metaphors work. So if you can draw a parallel of in a metaphor or simile, it really helps. Again, you often have to drill down into much more granular detail, but to talk about a way forward to start with. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously, brand strategists talk all the time about the powers of story and the fact that people, humans are, obviously, all the behavioral economists will go on about this as well. We are programmed to internalize and understand information in story form. This is a situation. These are the forces and protagonists at play. This is what happens and this is why. So the more one can tell one's strategy, all strategies they all boil down to the situation. You can see the situation like this. These are the most important priority elements of it. The big thing you need to realize, insight or, way forward. The big thing you need to realize, or the different way of looking at this, is why. Therefore, the path forward is X, Y, Z. And we're going to start with X. That structure that most strategic solutions tend to follow, it's just an elementary story. It's a story of what's going on now and why, what are the players, how you need to see it, what the path forward should be, and what you do next.
Yeah, that was it was interesting because Amelia Tarose was on one of the recent episodes, and she was talking a bit about the analogy of kind of, I suppose, communicating like a lawyer. How they actually sort of bring people on the journey with them and lay the breadcrumbs for a story, so that people actually get there themselves, and then then you deliver obviously your punchline or the final slide. I mean, it's interesting, is that I think that came from John Steele originally, but that ability to bring people on the journey with you in a story, is that what you really mean by that?
Yeah, I think so. And people use different ways of looking at it. obviously lawyers and storytelling has some slightly unfortunate connotations as well. But yes, definitely. And yeah, it is definitely about structuring information in a way that's just intuitive as humans for how we take it in. Doesn't matter how much our world has changed in the last 10, 20, 40 years, but how we process information. I mean, we are obviously somewhat primitive animals, and we still process information in particular ways. And there's a reason why that stories still exist in all sorts of forms, and that's all most, I think, strategic paths are. Most strategic solutions are just a story of, it could be like this, it could work like this, could do that. Corporate strategies as well, efficiency. You even see it in things like earnings calls and stuff. People telling like, this is the situation, and this is therefore what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. Good. Okay. So let's move on to the second question here, because I'd love to understand. You've obviously had a varied career and been sort of creative agency side, and you and Mr. Jones and so on. And I'd just love to understand, what do you think is the biggest mistake that you've made in your career, and what did you actually learn from that?
That was funny. Of course, it was great fun thinking about this one, because mistakes are quite funny from a distance when you've moved past them and survived them. So I was thinking about, there were just so many good ones. I remembered quite early on, I spent some time overseeing the production of a whole set of 60-second radio commercials for a 30-second media buy. I fielded an international quantitative research tracking study to prove the effectiveness of advertising, and forgot to include the most exposed ad. I've thrown beer accidentally down the front of one of my most senior clients, smashed another one on the head as I opened a door. I did a good one in the US actually early on, where I accidentally used the word, I won't say it, the word TW vowel T. The vowel is not I, twit, but a different vowel. That word in English is quite a gentle word, just meaning idiot. And I used it in that way. In an American context, it is not a gentle word. It's like the C word. And it was a stunning moment when I casually referred to myself as said word in a supposedly self-deprecating way. But anyway, so it was great fun to think about it, because it was like, I sounded like, actually, it was like my whole career has been like a French farce based on that list, doesn't it? But anyway, but I have to talk about only one thing really, because I wouldn't say it's a whole scale mistake, but one biggest mistake. I mean, I do have a one that just sort of sings above all the others, because it was a quite globally famous one. I have the honor of having made a mistake that was globally trending on Twitter in 2012, which was, I don't know if you went to South by Southwest that year in 2012, there was a program called Homeless Hotspots, a sort of digital product innovation initiative called Homeless Hotspots.
Yeah.
Which I greenlit, and it was sort of my project, along with brilliant guy, now just started his own consultancy, actually, Sunil Radia. He was at RGO for a long time, and some other folks. Anyway, it had very good ambitions. It was designed to be, as I say, an innovation, an experiment in a different way of enabling homeless people to make money, because the street newspaper model was breaking down, because people don't carry cash so much and they're shopping online more. And we thought we could sell Wi-Fi connectivity. We could empower homeless people to sell Wi-Fi connectivity at South by Southwest, where it was often difficult to get online with the crush of people. And we could prove this model, of course, in the spotlight of the world's digital leaders. And this would be great. As I say, I think, and we, by the way, we did quite a lot right. We partnered with a local homeless shelter, with all the money went to the homeless people, etc., etc. So all kind of good in theory, except execution. The t-shirts the guys actually wore to alert people to the service read, I'm whatever, Clarence, John, whatever, I'm so-and-so, I'm a homeless hotspot, which is obviously, in retrospect, stupid, objectifying, and it just, and out of context, just came across terribly. Anyway, the point was, it attracted well, we wanted to attract quite a lot of attention. It attracted very much more attention than we wanted. And yeah, it was publicly excoriated. I remember, yeah, I remember there was a big New York Times article almost immediately, which meant then there was a BBC article, which meant then there was, you know, I mean, it was literally, it was all over the world. As I say, within 24 hours, it was globally trending on Twitter, and it was all negative to start with. So that was quite a mistake. You know, that was quite a big deal, and it was just, as I say, it was on me to work out what to do about this. We, yeah, I'll talk about the learnings in a minute, but we did, yeah, they came out of the decision because we made the mistake. We had to make a decision quite quickly whether we just apologize and close down, or whether we try to justify and explain and keep going. And I think naively we did the latter, because a part of the retrospective hilarity of the situation is we had absolutely no crisis PR facilities or any advice, really. There was a junior trade PR person and me and Sunil. But we felt like, no, but this is well intentioned and it's making money for these homeless people. And that's a good thing. And so we're just going to try and tell the global media of the world that it's, you know, we're going to try and do this. So we started giving interviews and trying to talk about it. And anyway, so the big, and we did turn the sentiment, actually. It didn't go fully positive, but it really went from like 90% negative to, you know, 80% positive. And the big learnings were, well, obviously, you know, execution matters. But the other big learnings were, one, just, I mean, it's a prelude. I mean, it was like early fake news thing. It was a prelude of learning of just how much wrong information or absolute lack of information, like all the early coverage, no one knew anything. They got all the facts wrong. They thought, you know, there's a brand behind it, it's a commercial enterprise, we're keeping the money, etc. So it was an extraordinary and quite tense learning of how quickly misinformation spreads. And then but then after that, I suppose it was a good learning in the sense that, and the power of authenticity in a situation like that. Because what actually turned the story was when the homeless people themselves were in the program, started talking to the media direct. And they basically, each of them sort of said, and also homeless advocates themselves, right? So people who are working in the homeless space. So as this whole cloud of negativity exploded, the two sets of voices that were relentlessly positive were the people themselves who stood to benefit from the program, and expert homeless advocates and people working with homeless people. So, and they both had the same point, which was, well, it's working, which not much does. It's making money. Most of the homeless people, by the way, earned enough money to get deposits and get out of homelessness. And it's getting attention, and people are paying attention. And the homeless people themselves, I remember one guy particularly saying to me, you don't understand, like, South by Southwest comes every year. Nobody talks to us. Nobody even looks at us. And I've just had 3 days of every person who goes past me stopping and having a conversation and hearing about my personal circumstance and donating money. So it's just miles better. It's great. And I'm, you know, and then obviously when they start saying that to PBS and Spiegel and Radio 4 and all that stuff, it was good. But it did, along the way, there were hilarious moments. I remember I was in a taxi cab, and suddenly, you know, being in a taxi cab and then seeing yourself come up on the little TV screen, you know, like Cookson defends homeless hotspots program, and it's just, I remember going to CNN, and I'm literally, to do the interview, I'm literally Googling on the way how to do live TV interviews. I've got absolutely freaking no idea, no one to tell me. So yeah, so it was there were lots of facets of learning. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. It is extraordinary how painful and deluging. People are very, obviously, we all see it now. People were really, really horrible. And it's very personally, you know, the personal finger pointing was really nasty. So that wasn't not enjoyable. But yeah, lots of learning.
Yeah, I mean, a big learning curve, but also must have been pretty scary to be right at the center of that when it was
It
really sort of
wasn't
blowing
fun.
up and everything.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. So again, I think maybe our naivety helped a little bit. I think we didn't, in retrospect, probably the professional, sensible advisory thing to do would have been to sort of just to stop. But
Yeah.
anyway, for whatever reason, we didn't. So.
Yeah, good for you. Well, I just want to bring this back to the industry now, because you mentioned before about you and Mr. Jones and you positioning yourselves as the world's first brand tech group, which I think is a really
That's correct.
interesting kind of proposition. You've got some really interesting organizations within the group. And so if I can just flip to my third question, which is about your insight around how marketing and advertising is changing, and bearing in mind
Yeah.
all of the different focuses you've got within the group. So what would be your answer to that question about how the industry is changing?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah, it's a predictable answer, isn't it? Yeah, my answer is, how is it changing? Well, look at where I'm working. I think, yeah, I mean, the top line seems to me kind of the answer. Technology is the major disruptive force in our industry, like so many industries, um, and in lots of different ways, because there are lots and lots of different facets to that. So I don't think it's possible to pin it down to one one type of change. I think, I mean, obviously, you see all the sort of stuff. Technology has already enabled totally new forms of targeting and distribution. The whole programmatic thing. It's enabled totally different types of experience to be created. You can go to easy ones, AR, VR, MR, etc. Enables us to analyze gigantic data sets and increasingly, unstructured data as well as structured data, and to automate lots of tasks. I think more and more it's going to be about we'll be able to actually create content using technology in ways that are only people are only just getting used to. So there's just so many different dimensions to it, and hence the group is, I mean, there's lots of different facets. Some of the parts of the group are about data and data analytics and data strategy, and some parts are about content creation, some parts are about distribution and media, and of course increasingly now e-commerce and the enabling of online buying, etc. But yeah, to me that's the obvious big disruptive force, and you can point to particular technology. I think the arrival of the smartphone has to surely have been the most disruptive and biggest force of all sorts of marketing change in recent decade. But I presume probably the blockchain revolution will probably be the next one, which feels really, really in the foothills of how we're going to build on that technology, etc., which I definitely don't understand in complex technical terms. But yeah, there's just so many different sides to it. That's why I turned up where I am, because I thought, well, that's where it looks like the future's being made, in that zone.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to ask actually is you're a collective or a group of companies that specialize in particular areas. Like you've got 55, which is about data, Collectively, which is all about influence and marketing, MoFilm, which is a community of filmmakers, Gravity Road about content, Oliver, of course. I mean, why have them as separate organizations within that umbrella group? Why not just put it all together into one agency?
Yeah. Well, it does actually work all together sometimes. And increasingly, if it needs to, it will. So sometimes obviously brands that don't want the totality, they just want particular point solutions. And so some of the companies work, with particular brands in particular ways. But you're right, because oftentimes there is a desire to integrate different components, and the way that tends to, it can happen in different ways, but the way it most commonly happens is because at the heart of the group you've got Oliver, who build and run in-house studios for brands. It's a natural gateway and a connector essentially to plug in other parts of the group. So it's really easy, and it happens all the time, to plug in, whether it's like MoFilm, creator communities can plug in through that production team of Oliver, or the data analytics folks can be supplemented within teams, or whatever it takes. So because the Oliver model is not about is so collaborative at its core, because they're building and running those studios for brands. What they have to do all the time is, of course, collaborate with all the brand's other partners. And although I've heard obviously lots of agencies saying that and never really doing it, they do. They mean it. It is their business model. So, and it's their culture. So that's how it works. It works through that connection most commonly. And yeah, again, if again, there's lots of examples of clients, or bigger clients, where that stuff comes together. And if the client needs that to be through a single MSA, through a single point of contact, through a single point of leadership, then it can all be built through if they want, or structured through single leadership, etc. So it does happen. But obviously, and also, but partly it's because the group has been built up by bringing together brilliant practitioners in different zones.
Yeah.
We're very young. It'll probably evolve over time.
I think it's a really interesting proposition. I mean, and the other angle of this, of course, is about in-housing, because
Yes.
of course, with Oliver and I think you and Mr. Jones Media is all
Exactly.
about improving in-house capability. So just talk to me about that, because there's quite a lot of debate going on about that, about what the benefits are for in-housing, and whether it really, how it works, and whether you actually get the kind of the cynics would say the creative outputs, are they as good? Or what are the benefits? Just talk to me a bit about the dynamics around that.
Yeah, I think, well, look, I feel, you just have to look at the numbers, don't you? That Oliver's growth, the sector's growth, more and more marketing capabilities are in-housed by more and more brands. It's an extraordinarily steep growth curve. Like, obviously, that wouldn't be the case if it didn't work. It's kind of weird, but still the question comes up. There is a efficiency benefit that is almost instant immediately, and there is a speed benefit, and agility and speed benefit to doing more and more stuff internally. And there is a transparency and information and data ownership benefit to in-housing, which particularly is relevant when you get more into data in the media space. It just works. If you talk to Oliver, one of the most extraordinary stats within their data, and Oliver mostly is in-housing, building and running in-house content studios, not exclusively, but that's their core. And Nick and team will be building more out, as you say, the in-housing of media capabilities, and we'll be doing the same under Virginie, who's just joined us from Amazon in e-commerce. One of the most extraordinary stats about Oliver is that the retention of their clients, like, they just don't lose clients. The model works. And so, sure, things go up and down according to need, etc. But you just don't keep business like that unless you add an awful lot of value. And that's exactly what they do. And they have some brilliant creative people and brilliant creative technology, increasingly, to do stuff more automatically. And as I say, I'm sure the way we do this for media is going to be huge anyway. But again, it's like, of course, so sometimes things not work. Of course, the things need to be worked out better. Yes, obviously. But the model just makes sense. And I think if I was going to oversimplify it, I'd say the immediate benefits, because we can nearly always promise a cost saving and efficiency, that's often what gets the door open. What keeps the business is speed. I think the agility and efficiency, it is so much less laborious than that ping pong back and forth across the fence to have your own team. They saw it again time and time again with COVID. You can imagine the need to be pivoting super fast to totally different situations.
Yeah, I guess just to sort of play devil's advocate for a moment on this, because clearly there's upsides and downsides of in-housing, and there has been some cynicism around, is the creative output going to be as good? Maybe if you're able to, are you able to attract creative talent into working inside organizations in the same way? So are there downsides to it? Are there sort of risks involved with it?
Well, I don't think that one is a big one, because again, you have to. I suppose you have to draw this distinction as well. There's in-housing, as in the traditional way, which is an organization hires and runs their own team. So I am AT&T, I build and run my team. Not that actually they've got a very successful in-house agency, but anyway, whatever. And then there's the Oliver way, which is we build, hire, we employ and run your team for you. And I think it is possible, especially if you're in certain geographies and certain sectors, that it's hard to find the right talent and get the best people in that first model, because a lot of people don't necessarily want to work in an environment where they only get to work with a more limited team, or in a particular place, geography, or in a certain sector. But the genius of that Oliver model is, yeah, we get great talent, because what I promised to you, if you're an artwork, a designer or something, is you get to work in this way. By the way, I can pretty much guarantee miles more of your work will get bought, because the sell rates are gigantically better. You'll get loads more work out the door, and you'll be more trusted. And you then, if you want to, you start working on Unilever, great. But if you then want to work on Adidas, or you then want to work on Facebook or whatever else, then you can, over time, we can move you around. Look, I think as well, the other thing I'd say is that there's been a sea change in terms of the desirability. Talent wants to work in growth and winning environments.
Right.
And everybody knows that, painfully, that a lot of the traditional agency environments are under painful stress, some for reasons that the people, there's lots of talent there, but it's not always their fault. But nevertheless, those models are under extreme duress. That doesn't make for a really exciting work experience and career progression. And in-housing is thriving and booming, and so there's lots of opportunity. And of course, I don't mean to be naive. Of course, that does sometimes, do you get examples of in-house teams which don't fully work or not the right sound? Of course, like everything.
Yeah.
But no, honestly, I really don't think that the typical stuff that is questioned, it doesn't stand up. It doesn't stand up when you look at the facts of what's happening.
And I'd love to ask as well, I mean, the kind of benefits you were talking about earlier, so efficiency, speed, transparency, and data ownership is an interesting one, because it just feels like, you need certain things now much closer to
Exactly.
you as an organization. And yet you still have the capability to bring in lots of different expertise from outside of that. So how do you decide what's in and what's out? Is there a kind of delineation here?
Yeah, that does depend massively on a case-by-case basis, because what is core to one, and again, this is something that's really misunderstood about the Oliver model, that every agency, every studio they build is really different from the last one. They're really, really bespoke. So to a question like that, what is core team, full-on team in one organization, is going to be peripheral or non-existent or seasonal in another. So again, like there'll be the team which would be literally just helping to handle all your CRM or your e-commerce content or something. Another time it'll be all about your digital social content, but actually won't be touching any of the e-commerce. So it really varies, but the core model does involve both on-site teams and hubs of more occasionally needed but already brand immersed experts. So one of the big advantages of the model is about the ability to dial up and down capability according to seasonality or some sort of external factor, or just because it's a one-off need. Again, it's very difficult. You're running your own in-house team if you need to build a whole new product experience. You need like much more sophisticated UX and structural design people, but you don't need them for the rest. You need them for 6 months or a year. That's hard. That's where the old agency model helps. So again, the Oliver model is the midway point, so we can dial up that and then it can be taken away again.
Yeah, really interesting. And so I guess we started talking about some really interesting themes there. So if I can just build on that with your prediction for the future of the industry, what would that be?
Yeah. God, there's so many, isn't there? There's so many. I started out with all the obvious. Social selling, more and more influencers and creators. China, of course, culture is going to start coming east to west, not west to east, music and gaming and everything. But yeah, I'll actually, I think I steal somewhat blatantly from David, my boss, David Jones. He's talked recently quite a lot. He's been doing presentations about. I think the biggest thing for me would be the importance of virtual worlds, virtual identities, and virtual worlds. And I think I see the giganticness of gaming as an activity as just a first iteration, a prelude to this. And it just strikes me as, if you're a brand or you're a marketer, what gaming is now is, the name is just sort of, it no longer encompasses it. Again, I have teenage children, so I see it more clearly through them. But gaming isn't just playing games or even just watching games or recording games. Gaming is just where people, increasingly young people, they hang out and where they meet people and where they go to events. Look at those enormous Lil Nas X and those Roblox and Fortnite events. So you go and see events and you can increasingly buy stuff and do things, shopping. So gaming, like this, the world of gaming is just this gigantic virtual thing. And of course, and you get to be a different identity if you want to be, or multiple identities. And I just think that the big imminent shift in marketing is going to be like today, if you're in charge of a brand, if you're a marketing advisor, you have to navigate the brand success in the real world and probably in the social world. And increasingly, it's going to be about how do you navigate that in a virtual world. Like, I really don't think any of us have worked out yet what that actually means and how it'll work. But I suspect it's not far away that a lot of people will exist. Like now, I already feel I sort of slightly exist in social life as I exist in the real world. But it'll be, I exist in a virtual world and social world and real world. And if I'm a brand, if I'm a brand, I can't not show up in social to with my identity and my experiences and my messages there. And I think whatever these virtual worlds evolve to, that will be the thing that we all have to work through and sort out. And I think it's, well, obviously it feels very exciting. It also feels a bit very challenging at the moment because it is early.
It sounds.
Notice I didn't use the word metaverse, by the way, in that description, because I'm not sure it's super helpful. But yes, I suppose that's what I'm.
It's
really
I'm
hard, scrabbling around that zone, aren't I?
Yeah, but I mean, just for brands, how do you engage in those spaces? Because that is really tough, isn't it? Because it's just.
Exactly.
It is literally another world, and so different kind of rules and different kind of parameters exist in that world. And so, how do you kind of advise brands about how they can, take part in that and be a part of that in an authentic way?
Yeah, I think the advice is always the same, isn't it? That it's worth to personally get involved, so you start to understand it instinctively. Just like with social, everyone told you in those very early days, well, if you're not on any of these social networks, you're not going to get them. So, but then also there are some simple things you can do. It's still quite easy to understand, like, that's a good idea. A good idea is still a good idea, whatever environment is. You can still recognize the same characteristics. It makes sense. But I think starting to think to encourage brands, was saying to brands, so you should start thinking about, if you offered digital goods and services, what would they be? That's not a bad start. Yes, if you're going to show up in a digital environment, what are you going to offer? What are you going to do? If you're going to start to develop experiences. I think it's partly just about leaning in and seeing the potential, being excited about it, because enthusiasm and a sense of what might be can usually get you quite a long way to start coming up with ideas. And then also, listen to your teenagers, listen to those people who are younger than you, who are much, again, I feel like I learn quite a lot in my job, hopefully, but I learn an awful lot through annoying my 19-year-old and my 17-year-old with questions about what they're currently doing and why. And I can feel this thing, because I've got a daughter who spends her money on Genshin Impact, not in H&M, or is most excited to wake up at 5 a.m. for a new extension that's been downloaded. And you can feel it much more tangibly than just reading the articles, etc. So
fascinating. I think it's a really interesting space, isn't it? And I mean, NFTs is obviously a bit of a
exactly. It's a big part of it.
That's quite an interesting space, isn't it?
No, exactly, and it's a big part of it, because obviously the NFTs are just unique digital goods. So because they are structured to be unique and therefore transferable, from in the gaming world, you can't take digital goods from one place to another. With NFTs you can, etc. So absolutely, NFTs are completely central to what some of these solutions might be, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. So that brings us to our last question, which is what's the question that you wish that I'd asked you, and what's your answer to that? So if I can ask you that question, please.
My answer to this is one, not because I think I've got a particularly good answer to the question, because I just think there's a question I used to always hate being asked and say, don't ask me this. And then I realized that was stupid and an error, and I feel guilty about it. So now I always want to be asked it. And the question is the cliched one, which is just, how do you succeed as a woman in this industry? I used to get it all the time, because I'm kind of old. So I come from the generation where there weren't that many senior female leaders. And I used to find it annoying, because it implied to me that I'd had some sort of different path, maybe an easier path, or I don't know. I just used to hate the singling out, and just ask me as a person. I don't want to be asked as a woman. And now I think that was just a stupid, naive perspective. So I always want to be asked, how did you feel about this as a woman, or how did you succeed as a woman? Even though now, if I pose that question to myself, I don't feel I have anything particularly illuminating to say. I just want to say it is an important question, because the only way that diversity really happens is through hearing more voices talking about and representing what you can be and where you can go. And obviously the gender one, feels like there's been lots of progress, much more now. It's about race and ethnicity, and the hill seems much steeper to climb. And I'm obviously a very mainstream white person, so I have nothing of value to add on that side. But yes, to me it's just I used to, I think, talk about gender diversity in a way that was silly, and now I realise you really do need to hear from people like you all the time if you're going to have better odds of doing well. So I would like to be asked, so how did you succeed as a woman? And then I've got nothing useful to say. I just think the question should be out there. Because all my answers are kind of cliched. Work very hard and be decent to people, and etc. Run at the future. That must be something, John Bartle's phrase.
I'm just going to push you on that, because it is an interesting question. And if you were to, bearing in mind the audience we have, if there was a message for perhaps young women in the industry, I mean, what would it be? What do you think that would be?
That there isn't an answer. I'm conscious that I had an interesting experience. It was a few years ago. We organised an event in New York, which is about women in the industry. Various people spoke, and I was on a panel with two other women, and It just really came home to me. The question was about actually specific to having children and how did you navigate having young children and having fairly senior positions in the industry. And we gave 3 answers. We all gave an answer, and they were completely different. So the first woman said, I just decided I would always prioritize my children. If there's a difficult moment, the answer is whatever the child needs, that's the right thing. The second person said, through extreme organization and systematization. I'm an account person. I know how to run systems. I can apply that to family and child, and it works for me. And I systematized it. And I said something like, lower your standards, just assume it's all going to go wrong, and then don't stress about it. But the point is, I feel all those are valid positions, and they're all right. But when you're in a minority or a less central group, you're looking, because it seems hard, you're looking for the answers. And the point is, there isn't the answer. Those were 3 successful leaders. It's not just that we had slightly different nuanced answers. Our answers clashed with each other. You couldn't have a bit of one and a bit of another. And that's my big thing, is just like, you find your way and don't also, like, so you maybe got some woman like me standing out here, you might think, oh god, right, so I better listen to Emma, she's done quite successfully, hasn't she? She's now at this big role, etc. But maybe everything that's about me is completely irrelevant. And I don't think guys have that problem. They don't think, oh, just because this man has done this and I must do that. But there's something about not being the majority that makes you think you need to agree with, follow in the footsteps, or take learning from everybody who also belongs in your minority. And it's just not true. It's just not true. So I think I'm comfortably ending this with, so don't listen to me, aren't I? Like, this could all be completely useless.
Emma, that's a great way to wrap it up. But thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of Firestarters. And so for all the viewers, don't forget to share the video and obviously like it as well. But my thanks again to Emma. We've run out of time now, unfortunately, but really good to have you as part of Firestarters. Thank you again,
Thanks
Emma.
very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Neil.